but soldiers who had survived it were dying of the influenza. They brought it back from Europe with them, and now everybody was afraid of getting it. I'd heard Helen's stories about it too. For a month, she'd warned me every morning to be careful, told me to stay away from crowds, to take my lunch to work so that I didn't have to eat in a restaurant. We'd stopped going to the moving pictures, to the department stores, even to church. Although that was no sacrifice, because we rarely attended church anyway. Maud, our tenant, had died of the influenza, and we'd taken in her 10-year-old daughter, Dorothy. There'd even been talk about canceling the Liberty Loan Parade today, but it had been held, and I'd gone out onto the street to watch it, mingling with the crowd, heedless of Helen's warnings. It came to me now that I could be that person on the ground, my arms and legs thrashing, my face dark blue. With the rest of the crowd, I stood silently, fascinated as well as repelled, as I watched the soldier stop jerking. He twitched a little and was still. "He's dead," someone said. I shivered. I was disgusted with myself for doing nothing. I should have knelt beside him, taken his hand. He should have died with a human touch. What if he had been Peter, my fiancé who was fighting in France? If he were dying, I'd want someone to hold his hand for his last moments. But I was as frightened of catching the influenza as everyone else. I shuddered and stepped back, wondering if I'd been too close. Maybe someone in that handful of people staring at the body already had the influenza, and one of us would be dead by morning. "We should call an ambulance," one of the bystanders muttered. "There aren't any to spare," the man beside me said. "Besides, they don't send them for the dead." "We can't just leave him there." I was surprised that I'd spoken up. "Oh, they have the death wagons that go around every day, or the army will come for him," the well-dressed man said. "I have a telephone. I'll call Central when I get home. He shouldn't lie there too long. Dogs will come around. Maybe kids." He tugged at his soft felt hat, pulling it lower on his forehead. With a last look at the dead soldier, the men hurried off, shuffling through the brown leaves, thinking how they'd announce, "You won't believe what I saw today," embroidering the story so it would sound a little better. They'd make themselves look a little better, too, say they were about to help, until they thought they might carry the sickness home. "If it wasn't for you, I'd have helped him," they'd say, shifting the blame to their wives. I was the last to leave. Helen had seen dozens of dead people, but this was my first outside of a funeral home anyway. And there the dead had been prettied up until they looked like giant wax dolls instead of real people, robbed of life. I didn't know the man lying on the ground in front of me. At least, I didn't think so. It was hard to tell with the blood and his dark face. Had he been walking to his girl's home or running to catch the streetcar? Maybe he lived in that house and had gone outdoors to die. Did he have a wife or a family who'd thought he was safe when he came home from the war? Maybe he'd promised to read a story to his daughter or play marbles with his son that evening. They would wonder where he was as they waited at the table, dinner getting cold. If they had a telephone, they'd call the hospitals to see if he'd been in an accident. At the backs of their minds, there'd be a tiny worry that it might be the influenza. But no, he'd survived the guns and disease and trenches of the Western Front. He wouldn't die of a little influenza. I thought how awful it was to pass on as he had, outside in the cold, strangers gawking. I'd always thought of myself dying in bed when I was very old, my hair and nightdress white against the white linens of the bed, surrounded by people who loved me, weeping, and me peaceful, assuring everyone I wasn't afraid, but was ready for what lay ahead. That is to say, I hadn't thought much about dying, but now it came to me. I could be lying there on the ground, ugly, fouled, sending out the stench of death. People walking by with their handkerchiefs over their noses, staring at me with disgust. Dying wasn't my sanitized